So, what is differentiated instruction? The Woolfolk text defines it as teaching that takes into account students' abilities, prior knowledge, and challenges so that instruction matches not only the subject being taught, but also student needs. To expand on that definition, differentiated instruction is effective instruction responding to students' interests, readiness, and learning differences, allowing educators and students to build on new learning through connections to existing knowledge and preferred ways of working. Using assessment to measure where students are at in their learning, considering this information to adjust their learning environment, instruction, assessment, and evaluation. Educators use both instructional and assessment strategies to meet the needs of different learners when implementing differentiated instruction, not creating individual learning plans for each student, but considering flexible forms of assessment altering instructional plans in response to the learner's needs. In terms of connecting differentiated instruction to the third path, we looked at the regulation condition where teachers are to recognize the uniqueness of each child to guide them on how they can become better regulated and further strengthen their regulation skills. A few strategies to promote regulation with your students would be working towards a common classroom, co-regulate through common congruent communication, which would be building a better trust between the educator and their student, practicing mindfulness to increase student self-awareness, working towards self-acceptance and better self-control, also emotional awareness strategies and knowing our own brain and body. In practicing differentiated instruction, these stress regulation strategies will aid a teacher in understanding their students' needs when it comes to coping with stress and triggers in the classroom, taking thoughtfulness and deliberate action to address the particular student need and measure their readiness.
The third path, book Positively, has growth mindset within it. Teachers and students must have a growth mindset to allow differentiated instruction to work in a classroom setting. A quote from the third path is, "The neuroplasticity of our brains promotes the idea that most people can excel in most areas if they are willing to do the work and have the right support. This mindset leads students to have very different views of themselves, their capabilities, and the nature of learning, especially when the learning becomes challenging." This can be found on page 14. So, learning through differentiated instruction creates the opportunity for the teacher and the student to move from a fixed mindset perspective to a growth mindset and work together. Growth mindset allows both the teachers and students to embrace challenges they face when trying to teach or learn a new learning style in the classroom. Teachers need to have positive thinking perspectives when faced with challenges that differentiated instruction might present.
Next, we will look at the connections to the third path, engagement. Children need to be exposed to a range of engaging activities as well as to learn in environments that are more likely to engage. DEI in the classroom can be done in several ways, for example, grouping, varying amounts of time, or changing the task. Collaborative learning is a powerful facilitator of engagement in learning activities. When students work effectively with others, their engagement may be amplified as a result. When presenting new information to students, use chunking to bundle knowledge together so that students will be less likely to be overwhelmed by information overload. DEI helps students make meaningful connections between new information and knowledge that they already have. Connect new learning to their interests and to learning that has come before.
OCT Ethical Standards and Standards of Practice. According to the OCT Ethical Standards of Practice, there are 4 main practices that must be taken into account when designing differentiated instruction. They include care, respect, trust, and integrity. Let's go through each one and see how they relate to differentiated instruction. Starting with care. When designing differentiated instruction, it is important to consider the student's well-being and create a task that is not only positively motivating, but also promotes student growth and happiness. Respect. Differentiated instruction must come from a place of respect that considers the student's identity and learning prowesses. Trust. In order for differentiated instruction to be successful, a strong relationship built upon the foundations of trust must be established between teacher and student. Integrity. Making sure that designed instruction is fair and reasonable is paramount to differentiated instructional planning.
Misconceptions about learning disabilities. On page 143 of the Bennett text, there are 9 misconceptions about learning disabilities. The first one is heredity plays no role in learning disabilities. Learning disabilities only show up in schools and therefore are a school problem. The main cause of learning disabilities is bad teaching. Most students will outgrow a learning disability. Students who are learning disabled are highly intelligent. Learning disabilities and acquired brain injury are one and the same. Students who are ADHD are learning disabled and vice versa. Students who are learning disabled are more likely to become delinquent or criminal. It is possible to detect the presence of a learning disability by testing. It is good to recognize that all these misconceptions exist in the classroom. The case study that was chosen is from the Bennett text, page 184. This is the case of Robin. Robin has a developmental disability, and her language skills are not the same level as her peers. The school has tried to implement a parallel curriculum, but has not been working well in the classroom. So there was an example of a lesson that is introducing Indigenous culture through books and art samples with a few guiding questions. So an example of how her content is being differentiated is the content is changing and the topics questions are to engage the student more. Through the process, there's a wide variety of materials that will be introduced, allowing the students to access technology and allowing students to have the ability to support each other. And the final project, the student will be allowed to present the information in multiple formats, and the ability to accommodate Robin will allow her to reach not all expectations, but some expectations for her grade level.
DI Growing Success Framework. In order to plan effective DI, you must make sure your lesson adopts the Growing Success Framework from DI drawn directly from the Growing Success document. This is the Growing Success Framework. Number 1, a safe and non-threatening learning environment encourages learning. Learners who experience discomfort in connection with rejection, failure, pressure, or intimidation may not feel safe in the learning context. 2, learners must be appropriately challenged. The content of new learning should be neither too difficult nor too easy, so that learners can be comfortable enough to accept the challenge that new learning offers. 3, learners must be able to make new meaning of new ideas and skills through significant association with elements of previous knowledge and experience. Strategies. Here are some examples of how to include DI in the classroom. Strategy number 1, create learning stations. In these stations, have students work together and complete activities that engage different forms of thinking. Each learning station can present a different way to reach a given learning goal. For instance, one station would have the students watch a video and answer questions, while another station has them view an image and discuss the meaning behind said image in their groups. Strategy number 2, interview students. Through observation and direct one-on-one conversations with the students, the teacher can build an information bank on each student. Using this information, the teacher can curate the lesson to meet the student's needs. Also, by reviewing a student's IEP, the teacher can differentiate instruction. Strategy number 3, journaling, reflection writing. By having students engage in reflective practices, they can look back on their learning from the past lesson and determine if they have met the learning goals or success criteria. If they realize that they haven't, they can make a note to the teacher or have a conversation with them outlining problem areas in their learning. The teacher can then adapt the subsequent lesson to address those problem areas specifically. Strategy number 4, create sensory-specific lessons. To better differentiate instruction for the students, create lessons that target students' sensory strengths. Perhaps they're a visual learner that incorporate videos and pictures of interest. If they're a kinesthetic, hands-on learner, consider using a problem-based learning approach that focuses on a hands-on community project.
Effective teaching for exceptional students does not require a unique set of skills. It is a combination of good teaching strategies and sensitivity to your students' needs. To accomplish integrating students with disabilities into the day-to-day life of the classroom, Marilyn Friend and William Bursuck recommended the INCLUDE strategy. INCLUDE stands for Identify the environmental, curricular, and instructional demands of your classroom. Note students' learning strengths and needs. Check for potential areas of student success. Look for potential problem areas. Use information gathered to brainstorm instructional adaptations. Decide which adaptations to try. Evaluate student progress.